What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, Green Bay Packers podcast for the Blue Wire Podcast Network and the Eurostep Podcast Network. I am your host, Numac, on a lovely, rainy Sunday morning. Joining me is my co-host, Jordan Tresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Doing well. The draft is over. The Packers have more players. We're breaking it down.
Specifically, 13 more players.
It's true.
Big draft for the Packers. As you all loyal listeners know, they picked up Lucas Van Ness in the first round on Thursday, and then proceeded to go a whole bunch of offense the rest of the draft to surround Jordan Love with as much young talent as he can as he progresses into his first year starting. So, without further ado, should we kind of just jump into the draft and who they picked?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So we'll go through each pick first. Like we'll just give you the list of all of them, and then we'll do a little bit of a dive into each of these guys for a little bit. So Packers had 2 second-round picks on Friday after acquiring one of them through the Aaron Rodgers trade with the Jets. They selected at 42 overall tight end Luke Musgrave from Oregon State, and then traded pick 45 to another team who I forget who.
Detroit?
I think it was Detroit. But then they moved back to pick 50 and picked wide receiver Jaden Reed from Michigan State. And then to finish out the draft on Friday, they selected another tight end, Tucker Kraft, from South Dakota State, who we had talked about on the offense for the draft preview offense edition podcast. And I said that was my target for a tight end in the third round if they couldn't get a tight end in the second round, but they double up on Friday. And then Saturday, they kick off the day drafting Colby Wooden from Auburn, a defensive lineman, an interior defensive lineman. Sean Clifford, a quarterback from Penn State. Dontavion Wicks, a wide receiver from Virginia. Carl Brooks, interior defensive lineman from Bowling Green. Kicker, Anders Carlson from Auburn. He is the brother of Daniel Carlson, I believe. Former Raiders kicker, I think. Current Vikings kicker, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, flipped.
Flipped?
He used to be the Vikings kicker.
Oh, okay.
They caught him. Raiders picked him up.
Little flip flop.
Little flip flop.
They drafted Carrington Valentine, cornerback from Kentucky. Lou Nichols, a running back from Central Michigan. Anthony Johnson Jr., a safety from Iowa State. And then Grant DeBose, a wide receiver from Charlotte University. So we'll get into all of them individually in a minute here. But I guess initial process thoughts, Jordan, just on basically going, they had 7 offensive players, 5 defensive players, and obviously the kicker. So what are your thoughts on Goody's approach?
Very interesting. I think some of the biggest roster needs, not that this is the end all be all of how you would look at, adding through the draft, but you have one side of the spectrum of tight ends where they literally had 2 tight ends in the same night, fortify that room. And then safety on the other end, you have safety picked up Anthony Johnson, 7th-round pick. I'm not saying that we're expecting him to be a starter, but considering that there's still uncertainty of what that looks like going into camp this year, and then throughout the whole year, coming season, I think those are the biggest kind of position groups that looked like they needed to get filled very fast, and they took different approaches to do that, which I thought was interesting. I think the general topic of getting Jordan Love the help that he needs to really succeed in the first couple of years of his time at Green Bay. Not everybody's gonna thrive or succeed, but I think they went a long way in adding or taking as much flyers on wide receivers, tight ends, and considering what they already have, the depth there is certainly good enough that one would think that the number of players that you have in both rooms would help Love, and you kind of go with the flow and how things adjust and who's healthy, who's not, all that, all the stuff that we'll follow over the next couple of months and certainly
Right.
when the season starts. But yeah, those are the probably the biggest ones that kind of jumped out to me once things kind of settled after the draft.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll give my thoughts on tight end and drafted into two of them on um, night two a little bit once we go through both of the tight ends. But yeah, same thing for me. Honestly, like I'm a big fan of surrounding Jordan Love with as much talent as he can to get the most out of him next 2 years. It's a sentence I've said a lot over the past 2 months, but Goody did the same thing, taking a lot out of wide receivers and a lot of tight ends just to take swings on to see what will work and who will work and who they can slot in to be really impactful weapons in this offense because you have two in Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs, three in Aaron Jones, and then you have your kind of fringe guys with Josiah DeGuara and AJ Dillon at times. Like AJ Dillon was good in 2 years ago, but a little bit inconsistent, I think, as a part of the coaching scheme last year. But yeah, I think they just want to get as many chances, basically chances at players to see who can really contribute to an offense in a Matt LaFleur offense. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot. I think coming out of training camp too, which is obviously not for months and months, but I think that'll be a big indicator of just how they plan on utilizing all these wide receivers and tight ends that they drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll save more thoughts when we break it down.
Yeah.
Just the impact of what it means for obviously the players that they selected, but the players that may not be, secured in the future in Green Bay.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Um, should we start with obviously the player breakdown? Start with Luke Musgrave, second round pick.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Luke Musgrave was one of the guys I believe we both looked at in the the draft process, the preview process. Out of Oregon State, didn't play a whole lot this past year because he sustained an injury and he was out for the season. I think if they said if he would have had surgery, it would have been like 6 to 8 weeks. He would have had to have been out, but I think he just recovered naturally. I don't think he had surgery. Was cleared by doctors pre-draft to play, so he's all good that way. Pardon my vamping while I pull up the draft guide to get all of his stats and such. But big pass catching receiver. I liked him. I thought he had a pretty good route running tree, as well as just did a very good job catching the ball with his hands. Depending on how well he can take some hits after catching the ball to increase his yards after catch, we'll see. But yeah, I think it's a really great pick. I preferred obviously Darnell Washington. You guys heard all of my campaigning for the Packers to take him if he was there. He ultimately falls to I think the fifth round to Pittsburgh. So good for him. I'm glad he got drafted at all, but there must have been some injury concerns that all the teams in the NFL were quite worried about. So
Specifically, it was his knee.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and it being 6'8", 6'5", or he's pretty tall. Knee injury, 6'6.5". So knee injury, not the greatest for that guy that big. But Luke Musgrave, 4-year player at Oregon State, really came on the last 2 years. Had 22 receptions in 2021 and 11 in 2022. Not the most you'd like to see. I think Mel Kiper during the draft show was talking about how you would have liked to have a tight end had more catching experience than he did coming out of the draft. But like I said, he had 22 catches in 13 games in 21, and then in 2 games in 22 he had 11. And so like he was basically on course to surpass his 2021 levels or stats in 4 games essentially. So before he got injured. And 4 of his 11 catches in 2022 went for over 25 yards. So down the field threat. And basically a guy that I can see, I don't want to say like replaced Bobby Tunyon because I think that's Tucker Kraft, who we'll see a little bit later. But just another basically weapon. I'm excited for two tight end sets, which we can talk about now. But big jumbo packages where they just fill up the line and then throw Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft on one and both ends of the line, and then have a running back and a receiver out there, and just let them go, let the run game flourish. So, what do you think of Tucker Kraft? Or not Tucker Kraft. I'm sorry, Luke Musgrave as the pick here over some of the other ones that were still available.
Certainly interesting. Context too of the start of the second round, we saw a bunch of tight ends go off the board. I think it was Sam Laporta that may have kind of started that run. He went to Detroit.
Yep.
Trying to think of other tight ends that we kind of looked at that were within range.
Mayer went there as well.
Yes. Yeah. Did he go to Detroit? No. He went to.
I'm letting you know in a second.
I forget who it was.
Sam Laporta went to the Detroit Lions. Michael Mayer
Yep.
went the pick later to the Raiders.
Ah.
And that was it until Luke Musgrave.
Okay. So yeah, a lot of the players that we already talked about, going into the draft, see a couple of big names go off the board. Dalton Kincaid got selected at the end of the first round too. So it was kind of like, okay, let's see who they're going to go. Obviously, at the time too, going into second round, they had Packers that picked 42 and 45. So you would have thought, a skill position player was going to be selected. Mm-hmm. The fact that they went with Musgrave at that point, I thought was interesting. I like what I've seen of him. I think my bias against what he, his productivity, his background, and all that stuff, learning more about where he came from, the play at Oregon State. It wasn't like he was a 4-year starter; he was a 2-year starter, and one of those years he got hurt.
Right.
So that kind of obviously affects your production. The fact that they were a mainly, running style team doesn't help either. Mm-hmm. At the same time, that kind of fits in with how the Packers, I think, are generally going to be moving forward. And again, he has athletic tools, certainly the size. The thing about, and you hit it on the head right away, and we'll get into it with Tucker Kraft too. Packers just needed big bodies for Jordan Love down the field, threats, guys that can make catches in tight windows, that can basically just think of the red zone creativity that can happen with guys like Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. Big bodies are just going to win balls. That's basically what you want for not a rookie quarterback, but a first-year starter quarterback.
Right.
In this day and age, and I think from that lens, I like what they did, and I especially like that they double dipped because it was such a glaring need based on where the roster stands that they kind of covered their bases with both Musgrave and Kraft, and maybe it wasn't just the fact that Musgrave was is still getting back to 100% health. Though I think I saw that he must have played in the Senior Bowl, which was interesting. Given the fact that he had all his injury stuff.
I don't know if he did, but I'll look right now.
Maybe I'm mixing it up with Tucker Kraft, but I was again. I think the theme too of all these picks is that I'm very whelmed by what the Packers selected and how they kind of judged what they have and then added where they did at the picks that they had.
Mm-hmm. I think he played. Yeah, looking at the Senior Bowl highlights, it looks like he did run routes and do stuff. I don't know if he had like full contact like in the game, but he did.
Okay.
But he did practice and whatnot. It was like he caught balls and did all that stuff. But yeah, I don't think he actually, or maybe he did. Looks like they did full scrimmages. So yeah, weird that the report of him being okay to play came out after the Senior Bowl, but
yeah.
So that's one of the big things for the Packers. If you haven't heard, not just you, Jordan, but you as well, listener. Packers love the Senior Bowl. Love it, love it, love it. Like they find a lot of their draft picks and who they're going to go for,
especially this year
at the Senior Bowl. So a bit of context to think about into years forward when the Packers are thinking about who they want to select because they value the Senior Bowl a whole bunch. So, should we move on to the third round or the next pick, Jaden Reed?
Let's do it.
Okay. Jaden Reed, wide receiver out of Michigan State. He was Dane Brugler's 10th ranked wide receiver in this class. Real fast guy. A little on the shorter end, 5'10", but was a player at Western Michigan. I think that was the year that PJ Fleck led them to a big run, if I'm not mistaken, in 2018. But at Western Michigan, he was a freshman All-American and had a 93-yard punt return for touchdown. I think that'll be part of why they drafted him, is to take out Keyshawn Nixon back there just in case like they want him to actually play a majority of his snaps at safety, or they just don't want to put him back there, which I disagree with. Like I think they should keep him back there as long as he's good. Probably just insurance at times. So
Yeah.
But then in 2019 he sat out due to transfer rules at Michigan State since he transferred there, and then over his 3-year career at Michigan State, he played in 31 games, had just over 110 catches. Trying to do some math here. 2,100 yards at Michigan State to go with 18 touchdowns. So a bit underrated coming out of his senior year, it seems, considering he was the 10th, I guess, rated prospect for wide receiver in his class. But whole man is he fast. His combine time was 4.45 for his 40, and I think I saw somewhere when they drafted him that the Packers had him at a 4, like a high 4.3s, like 4.35 or 4.36 or something. This dude is very fast, very 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 fast. I saw some highlights of I think him at the Senior Bowl as well, putting some moves on the whatever defensive back he was going against, and I got the vapors, Jordan. I was sweating. He's got a great break and just a great use of his speed to get open. And I was watching highlights, and he can jump up with the rest of them and catch some balls. He's got great ball tracking ability in air. Like there was a couple in the Wisconsin game, he simply just mossed whatever Wisconsin D-back was out there. But yeah, he's talented. He's talented.
Very much so. I saw some, not criticism, but I think of the wide receivers available. Again, kind of context of players that were taken off the board right before the Packers selected.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Mingo was selected by the Carolina Panthers at 39. Who else? There's another guy that
was still there.
Rasheed Rice, I think, was taken after.
Yep.
But he was a guy that I know a lot of Packers fans and bloggers, podcasters were really in the Rice grain. I don't know. So it was maybe a little bit of a curveball that Jaden Reed was the selection here, but
Jalen Hyatt was still available too.
Jalen, yes, that's the other guy that I forget where he actually went to.
Tennessee. Oh no, yeah, where he went, where he got
draft wise.
Yeah.
But based on what Jalen Reed did at Western Michigan and Michigan State, you got to tip your hat to what he did production wise. Brings a ton of speed. A lot of guys like draft experts. I'll bring up Tom McShay's post draft recap right here in terms of best values for every team. He picked Jaden Reed, which kind of says something. Like Packers did a lot in terms of getting pass catching weapons with tight ends, a couple wide receivers, including Reed. The fact that Reed was picked or looked at as like undervalued, or not undervalued, right value kind of guy that may have flown under the radar, kind of speaks volumes to me. Whether that matches up when he is on the field and when it's game time, we'll see. But I certainly like the fact that they added to the wide receiver room, got a speedy threat that kind of does a little bit of different things than Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs.
Yep.
But I think it's all going to hopefully complement each other, and they got another kick return specialist, which it's not nothing when Keyshawn Nixon's on a 1 year contract and could easily
Yeah.
it's going to be this a big storyline year after year of just like getting someone in the door that could do something like that because of how bad Amari Rogers was.
Yeah. I think that's um, a great point. Excuse me. A great point on sort of why they drafted him. Just make sure they have insurance in case something happens with Keyshawn Nix and he might leave next year. But um, overall, I think he was the sixth wide receiver to come off the board after the 4 player run in the first round, and then Jonathan Mingo was drafted to the Giants, I believe, or not the Giants. Shortly before
Panthers.
Panthers. Thank you. Shortly before the Packers pick at 42. So, um, yeah, so 4-ish picks prior to what the Dane Brugler had him at his ranks. So, I'm not too concerned about it. I think it says a lot. Like, I think a player that produces a whole bunch in college, like, I am more okay with reaching on than like a prospect type of guy. Like, basically, like, I'm trying to think of like an example. If you have a guy that comes out of college and you know he's talented, you know he's athletic, he just needs to have the reps. I'm more nervous about that guy than a 4 year starter who puts up a whole bunch of numbers for like a fine program or a bad program, essentially. Like,
Yeah.
you just know that he can do it, right? He has the reps, he has the knowledge, he has all of the game experience and be a good quarter or wide receiver in the NFL. He just needs to prove himself at that next level, which I think he can. He has elite speed, and like I said, his ball tracking ability in the air was incredible. Just
Yep.
watching highlights of it, it's really really good. um, but yeah, I think he'll be a slot guy for sure, which is exactly what the Packers needed to have Christian Watson on one side, Romeo Dobbs on the other, and then Jaden Reed in the slot. I don't think there's going to be a easy way, whether it be this year or next year, if it takes a little bit for the offense to become cohesive. It's going to be hard to keep a top on this offense between Christian Watson's speed and Jaden Reed's speed.
Yes, that was the biggest thing for any wide receiver that I was looking at is like it's why Jalen Hyatt was certainly on my radar of like
Mm-hmm.
you just need someone that like I ideally like this is kind of a weird comp, but a guy like John Brown
Yeah.
who always whether it was I think it was the Cardinals, Ravens, Bills, he always finds his way on teams and just runs down the field faster than everybody else. And if someone like Jaden Reed is did I already screw up his name?
No, you're right.
Jaden Reed.
Jaden Reed.
There's a lot of Jaden and Jalen, so I'm just like,
Well, when they drafted Jaden Reed, I was spoiler alert, I was going to the bathroom and I was watching this because I had to go, and the Packers were picking, so I couldn't miss it. And I was washing my hands, and they picked it, and I heard Jaden. I went, oh, cool, they picked Jalen Hyatt. And then I heard Jaden Reed. I'm like, that's not how you say his name. And then I look, and when it says Michigan, I'm like, I don't know who this is. Like, who did they just pick? And so, yeah, I thought they drafted Jalen Hyatt. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. But yeah,
yeah,
watching Jaden Reed, or Jaden Reed's highlight stuff was has me optimistic.
yeah, same.
Um, I think that's all I have to say on Jaden Reed. You want to move on to Tucker Craft?
Let's do it.
Perfect. Um, like I said at the top, Tucker Craft, one of the guys, or was my pick in the third round offense draft preview. Um, ultimately has a lot of shades of Dallas Goddard, and that's just not like helmet watching because Goddard also went to South Dakota State, but just the same type of prospect in which that he is a great ball catcher, okay blocker, but he can definitely learn to develop into that better blocker. In his career at South Dakota State, he had 2 years starting essentially, 2021 and 2022. In 21, he played 15 games, 65 receptions for 780 yards. That's first team All American and first team All Conference for the Mountain Valley Football Conference, I believe. 2022, he played 9 games and started 8 of those. 27 receptions, 348 for yards, and 3 touchdowns. Missed 6 games with a right ankle injury. But yeah, another guy that just can just catch the ball and be a threat downfield. I think he reminds me of Bobby Tunyon more than Luke Musgrave does. Like a relatively slower guy, 4.69 on his 40, but just able to catch the ball quite well with his hands and not his chest, and get down the field and get catches over the middle. Like I think that's going to be the biggest plus to drafting Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft is Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love are going to be throwing the ball over the middle a whole lot. And you can throw Jaden Reed into this honestly too. Is there's going to be a lot of routes going over the middle this season, I hope at least. And these three rookies have an opportunity to find a role for themselves in this offense if they can catch the ball over the middle and turn some of those catches into some pretty decent yards after catch plays. And that also opens up the field for Christian Watson down the field. Throw a bunch of slants over the middle and then uncork it to Christian Watson on a deep route. It's pretty basic day one offense. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of him. He'll be a prospect or a project for sure, just to get him to be a better blocker and refine those pass catching abilities. But overall, I'm thrilled with the pick, frankly.
Yeah, you were on the train, the Tucker Craft train. That's to your own horn or your horn because it's not my own. But overwhelmingly came away with I think watching the draft, and we were on the Discord, join the Discord by the way, because it's very fun following along with the draft and seeing all the crazy selections and weird players that can't pronounce picks on draft night. Anyway,
where do you find the Discord?
Oh, you can find it at gspn.info. No. I'm going to lift this from PFF in a column that is titled Most Improved Rooms and Least Improved Rooms for Teams After the NFL Draft. Green Bay Packers tight ends falls into the most improved room.
Yep.
With both Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. And here's a little bit for Tucker Kraft. He averaged 2.32 yards per route run in 2022, and 7.7 yards of his 12.9 yards per reception came after the catch. That is yakety yak. I love yak.
Yakety
Yeah.
sacks.
Yeah, yakety sacks, but yeah, we won't call sacks because yeah. Another big body, can really move well. Guy that basically was, ever since he committed to South Dakota State, had offers from D1 schools,
including Alabama,
which again says something. Mm-hmm. Did not want to go, stuck it out. Good for him. And again, he's a second round pick. That's very impressive to do that from a D2 school. I know it's becoming a little bit more normalized now, and you're going to find those.
Third round pick, by the way.
Third round?
Tucker Kraft? Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
No.
There's a lot of picks.
Yeah, there's a lot of picks. Anyway, still to kind of be selected from a school that, is getting up there in terms of churning out NFL talent or players that are drafted, stuff like that. It's still not easy. That's overwhelmingly, there's a lot of picks, but it's still not easy to do that, given the circumstances. So yeah, very impressed by him. And again, I think I really like that they got two tight ends. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the two tight ends we got, again, obviously I was on the Darnell Washington trade. That trade has come to an abrupt stop. But with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, they have opportunity to be tight ends 1 and 2. Packers on their roster right now have Austin Allen, Tyler Davis, Josiah DeGuara, and Nick Gogamos as their tight ends. And throw Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft into that mix, and I don't see there's realities where they're tight ends 1 and 2. Like Josiah DeGuara and Tyler Davis have each 4 years experience, but they weren't the most inspiring the past couple years. I think they were always players we were hoping to take that next step, and they just never really did. Maybe it was lack of opportunity, or just didn't get the playing time, I suppose. But Yeah, I think Tyler Davis in particular was a guy that we were all hoping to be sort of the wide receiver tight end hybrid that would really help out this offense, and just never came to fruition. So it'll be a training camp battle for sure between those six tight ends to see who makes the roster and who kind of gets nixed. But I think for sure Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft will make the roster. The two other guys, Nick Agamos and Austin Allens, I hadn't heard of before. They're probably just practice squad guys. But whether Josiah Dewar and Tyler Davis make the roster will be a big question in July and August, because
Yep.
who knows if they will deserve to, or how it goes with their training camp and in the preseason. But if Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave are having great camps and great preseasons, then I don't know if there's a reality where they keep four tight ends. I hope there isn't. There probably shouldn't be.
No, I would doubt that. And yeah, it's gonna be one of the more competitive training camp battles going into the or I guess preseason.
Yeah, going into the season in general.
Yeah. Um yeah, that again, part of the reason why you you draft two tight ends in, high draft picks. You're kind of putting the guys on notice that are unproven, have battled through injuries, obviously, but like, it was so uncertain going into the draft, and now you have more guys to rely on that could really make their mark on this team right away, and it just ups your game even more.
Yeah, I think best case scenario for this team is they found a tight end tandem that can carry this offense for years to come. Like that's high ceiling expectations for them, but I think it's something they most certainly are capable of if they develop properly. It might take a couple years to get there, but I think there's potential for them to become a pretty great tandem in the NFL. Shall we move on? Anything else, Tucker Craft?
No, no, I think we kind of covered the bases there.
Sweet. Um, Back to defense in the fourth round, I believe. Now I'm second guessing myself. Yeah, in the fourth round, Colby Wooden, the defensive lineman out of Auburn. Big guy, 6'4", 273. Started 36 games out of his 40 played in college. He had 4 games he played in 2019, but otherwise he was a 3-year starter at Auburn. 42, 61, and 45 tackles, 4, 5, and 6 sacks. He had 3 forced fumbles just this past year, and then 2 pass deflections in 2021 and 1 in 2020. He had a blocked field goal in 2021, so a special teamer, along with just being a solid defensive lineman. We'll talk about the special teamers a little bit later, too, when it comes to Rich Bisaccia's sort of role in the draft. But his sophomore year, he was SEC he redshirted looking at, I think he might have gotten injured in 2019. I think that's why he was able to redshirt.
Yeah.
His second year playing, because he still played in 4 games 2019. His second year playing was his freshman year, quote unquote. He was in the SEC all freshman team and led the team in sacks and tackles for loss. So, watching his tape, big guy, quick, ran a 4.79 40. That's pretty fast for an interior defensive lineman. I think you noted it in your notes that you shared with me, but a big interior defensive lineman that also worked off of the edge. So a lot of flexibility in where you can kind of throw him should he need to fill in for an injured guy or give the offense a different look as to where they're putting him. So in his highlights, just strong. I was watching him take 2 hands and throw guards out of the way. So if you can do that at the NFL level, you're fine by me, buddy.
Yeah. What's his RAS? 9.25 RAS. That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. At your point of versatility, I think they're looking at every draft person, whether it's Brugler or I guess Kuiper, Daddy Kelly from the Ringer, who's good too, McShay. Um, always pegged him as a defensive lineman, which is interesting. But he's added 50 pounds since going to Auburn.
Auburn.
Auburn. Um, so yeah, he certainly has built his body into being more of a defensive lineman. And I don't know, kind of interesting pick. I thought another thing too. I my scouting hats for day two. I was kind of thinking like, well, I know they got Van Ness, but I did think considering who was still left. I mean, we saw the Anatomy were Atabara.
Yep.
That's terrible. He fell out to round 4. So
Yeah.
he's still available going to day 3. Some of the other guys that we looked at too were Keanu Benton was picked right before Jaden Reed.
Yep.
So basically, like I felt like the Packers could have easily added more to their defensive line on day 2. So still kind of on the lookout of like, okay, still not quite as solid as I would have or anybody would have liked going into day 3. Getting Wooden kind of helps that. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see if he can put more pressure on the guys that like TJ Sladen, Jonathan Ford, kind of the guys that have gotten snaps, but nowhere near secure as Kenny Clark, certainly Devontae Wyatt. And obviously with Dean Lowry gone, you kind of open up more snaps for a third rotational defensive lineman to kind of, eat up there. So yeah, I think Wooden has a good shot there, but you never know.
Yeah, definitely. Like draft and stash kind of player. Just like get him and start working with him to refine some of his techniques and his get him stronger. Brugler said his upper body power is kind of lacking, and that just late to reacting to some of the things that are happening at the line of scrimmage. So I think it'll all just be a process with Colby Wooden. Great name for a Packer though. Gotta love the Colby Jones.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But I guess we'll just see how it goes. I'm a fan of the depth personally, just to have him be behind Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark. See how the Slaytons perform and see how you can develop. I think this is just a good depth pick. Just because in his highlights that I was watching on YouTube, I was loving it. Like he was getting around guards, he was forcing fumbles, and had good instincts of when he was too deep and losing the edge. Like because he was too far upfield. Essentially, he had to spin to go around. A lot of good instincts and where he was able to rein in his pass rush to be more controlled rather than just pure power, which is good at times, but I don't think he has the pure power in general to like push back a guard on like a bull rush. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan. Anything else on Colby Wooden?
No, I think we can go on to the Tavion Weeks.
Close. That's the next pick after this one
God, why am I screwing this up?
because there's so many.
I know there are.
13.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
Sean
forget. Yeah.
Clifford. He's got that big red dog in him. Quarterback out of Penn State. I think this was an inevitability for the Packers, not Sean Clifford in general, but a quarterback.
Yep.
Goody and I think LaFleur talked pre-draft saying they wanted to get a third arm in the quarterback room, obviously just to have one. And we discussed it if we wanted them to draft one or sign one of the few older veterans out there. Good thing they got both. They drafted a veteran who is 3 months older than Jordan Love. But yeah, 23 ranked QB in Brugler's draft. Was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. 61.4% completion percentage, 10,000 yards, 86 to 31 touchdown to interceptions. I didn't get a chance to look at him too much, but I think he just kind of looks at me as a pretty much third string quarterback that's going to be there for depth issues should they need them.
Yeah, I was. First of all, I was not surprised. Just want to hit this home. Not surprised that the Packers selected a quarterback to ruin Jordan Love's era. Sorry. No, they basically didn't really hide that they were going to do this. Brian Gutekunst in his pre-draft conferences talked about adding another quarterback. They were not just settled with two quarterbacks between Love and Danny Etling.
Right.
Sean Clifford was a guy that they interviewed um, going into it, so it's clear that they liked him. With that said, a lot of the draft scouts like Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, I think too, basically said this guy was. They thought of him as a undrafted free agent kind of quarterback.
Interesting.
Does that, I don't know. It's so hard because it's like we know next to nothing of like how this is going to translate on the pro level.
Right.
And quarterbacks, I believe, I have it up here. There were how many quarterbacks? 14 quarterbacks selected in the draft, and Sean Clifford was the 11th in the 5th round. Okay. Brian Gutekunst said after the draft that they thought that he was going to be gone from where they were basically slated to go in the 5th round, or the first of their 5th round picks, which is interesting because it doesn't necessarily match up with consensus. Whether that's him kind of shielding himself from criticism of taking a quarterback that people thought was going to be an undrafted free agent, who knows? But you add depth to the room. You add a competition battle for who's going to be the backup essentially.
Yeah.
There are things that Sean Clifford can do well. It's clear that he does have process things and can make things happen on the move if things break down. I don't think he's the necessarily great kind of pure quarterback pocket passer kind of thing like that. I think he had like a 61 completion percentage over his career at Penn State.
Yep, that's right.
I don't know. I'm not going to go up in arms about it just because it was something that they needed to do. Mm-hmm. Whether I would have done that with a veteran or not, we talked about it before. This is how the Packers did it with Aaron Rodgers when he eventually was a starter. They drafted a quarterback at a higher pick with Brian Braum in 2008 and had Craig Dahl, I believe, too, at the same time. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not – my expectations are not high with Sean Clifford. It's purely on Jordan Love. And, of course, the worst thing happens and he gets hurt, knock on wood. We will see how Sean Clifford fares in those opportunities. But, yeah.
In your monologue there, I pulled up some highlights just watching him. And the rushing numbers make a whole lot of sense after watching his tape. He has like happy feet in the pocket, and he wants to run way earlier in the breakdown of the play than I think makes for a good quarterback. Like, does that make sense? Like, he almost looks at his first read, sees that he's not open, and then runs. And he's got good running numbers. He had 116 carries for 400 yards in 2019, 99 rushes in both 2020 and 2021 for 335 and 163 yards, and then 69 rushes for 176 yards in his senior year, this past year. But yeah, it didn't look like it was running to run. Like it wasn't like a run play, like a designed quarterback draw or anything like that. It looked like he had gone through his progressions very fast and then decided, nope, I'm going to take off. And when he saw a hole open up, which is fine, but I would rather have a better pocket passer than a quarterback that can run well, pretty much is how I am. Because there wasn't a whole lot of weren't a whole lot of highlights of him rolling out, using his legs to roll out and then throw a pass. It was, okay, I'm throwing from the pocket or I'm getting these yards with my legs. So take that how you may.
Yep.
But again, that's 4.5 minutes of YouTube highlights. So, anything else on the Big Red Dog, Mr. Clifford? Take that as a no.
No, I think we can move on.
Next one is Dontavion Wicks. Oh, baby. Did I watch some highlights last night? I am excited for Dontavian Wicks. Wide receiver from Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct.
Yep. I gotta pull up some of his stats here, but truth be told, doesn't matter a whole lot because I love his just build and everything else. He reminds me a lot of Romeo Dobbs. In his college career, 90 receptions, 1,600 or just about 1,700 yards, 12 TDs, and the biggest issue, 15 drops. So we'll get into the drops later, but holy moly, I was watching highlights of him last night, just entranced with his tape. He has elite jumping and ball like snagging skills. There's a couple, or I think there's one. I forget who they were playing, but basically mossed two receivers in the end zone for a touchdown. Just jumped over both of them, grabbed it, and came down 2 feet and bounced touchdown. Just really, really great skills. There's another one where they're facing Georgia Tech, running a slant over the middle, just jukes out the entire offense or the entire defense. Like very elusive guy. There is one other one where he caught the ball on a screen, put his foot in the ground, and juked out his covering cornerback, and then ran 45 yards for a touchdown. Like he's just got good breakaway speed, but really elusive, athletic guy to be throwing the ball to. So I think getting the drops fixed will be the biggest part of his game, and what will define him essentially as a NFL wide receiver if you can fix that issue. If he can, I think he has the opportunity to be a pretty awesome wide receiver at the NFL level.
Yeah, he might have the most fascinating arc of any Packers pick. Actually, I take that back. There's another Packers pick that we'll get to that had an interesting background and story. But in terms of like, it was either really, really good or, he missed an entire season with a Lisfranc injury, which is a foot injury. His senior season was incredibly disappointing. He had 9 drops, I think like 30 catches.
Yep.
All that stuff. A new offense too that he didn't necessarily adapt to, based on what I read. But you look at his junior season, 57 catches, 1,203 receiving yards, which is a lot of big plays, yards after the catch material, 9 touchdowns. That was more than half of his college stats.
Yeah, it was 2/3 of it. He had 1,200 as his junior season and 1,700 total.
Yeah, like ridiculous. And I think I read too that he did test draft waters last year and decided to come back. And frankly, I don't think he would have been a 5th rounder pick if that was the case last year. You know what I mean? Like, so I think they even said on the broadcast of like, the talent is there. There are things that have to be fixed, clearly. Does have some injury red flags or things that have curtailed his seasons for him. But if you believe that Dontavian is the guy that you saw as a junior Virginia, then it's even more reasonable that the Packers selected him when they did. That might be a case of finding someone that was undervalued this draft class, mainly by his own doing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm kind of like, Jaden Reed I'm excited by it, but I think I don't know. I find something a little bit more fascinating with Dontavian Wicks. God damn it.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Just in general, of if we can get junior year Dontavian Wicks, then we're sitting pretty. We're sitting real pretty. But yeah, I think it'll just be a lot of work to get those drops reined in, as well as just making sure that he's just ready for the NFL. And I think he has time to do it, right? He has Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs ahead of him, along with now probably Jaden Reed. Samari Toure, depending on how he develops, might be a little bit ahead of him as well, but I think for sure he'll be on the roster come September, just because of his pure talent. And if he does well in camp and really shows out kind of like how Romeo Dobbs did this past year, then I don't see a reason why he couldn't be a part of this offense this his rookie year.
Absolutely.
Big excited for that one. Very excited for
Hmm.
drafteomics. Next up, Carl Brooks, defensive lineman out
Mm.
of Bowling Green. Um, Going over some of the notes that you had drafted up 167 tackles, 46 tackles for loss, 27 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and over 4 years at Bowling Green. So, obviously, Bowling Green, not the most elite of programs, not the biggest of programs, but any kind of production like that, you're gonna show up on some draft boards. that's
Yeah.
uh that's pretty insane to have 6 forced fumbles and 27 sacks in 4 years. That's what, 7 sacks a year, just about. That's
He
crazy.
had he had 10 this past year and 18 tackles for losses, which were
Wow.
both leading the MAC conference, I think.
Maction
Little action from a Paction.
led his team in sacks in over his um first 3 years in 2018, 19, and 20. The 20 stat is a little bit misleading because he only played 3 games and had 2 sacks and led his team. I'm not sure if that's a typo from Dane Brugler, but if he led the team with 2 sacks, I think that says a lot about his teammate. But yeah, 10 sacks last year is incredible. Incredible. Um, just looking at some of the notes from the Beast, um, Dane Brugler says he has a unique package of tools, um, but creates questions about his ideal position or fit at his position, but has light feet and urgent hands to be a gap disruptor. So that kind of speaks to me like a run blocker kind of guy. Um, Best projects to be a 3 technique player who can be flexed up and down the line. So I didn't get a chance to watch any tape on him, but
I did.
you did. How do you look?
I I don't know. I'm kind of more intrigued by him than Wooden. Just
Really?
throwing it out there. Yeah. Lowest Packer to be drafted with, or lowest RAS for a Packer to be drafted, he was at 5.88. But consistently a guy that was, I think even Dave Brugler wrote it, that at some point you kind of have to, everything with the testing, you kind of have to discount when a guy is making plays as much as he is. And another guy that transformed his body, he added more weight. I think it was, let me go to my notes here really quick. Um, Actually, I may be wrong about that. But basically, converted from a linebacker to more of a D line guy, kind of pseudo edge, kind of tweener, basically. Um, and I don't know. I I think the thing too is that like you just want to see someone every once in a while. You kind of want to just kind of like, okay, this guy's super fast, super athletic, blah 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 blah.
Mm.
If the production isn't there, though, do you really value that so much over and over again? Where a guy like Carl Brooks, who coming off an incredibly good year, I know wasn't the highest talent. You touched on that too, or uh, competition level around him, but it's a nice dart throw. The guy could be exactly what the Packers need on the line, and just versatility. That was another thing. They got a lot of defensive line help, but it's guys that can line up on the edge, line up in the middle of the defense, over gaps, whatever. They're going to have a lot of versatility in ways that will be hopefully more welcomed when as time goes on, and we'll see how Joe Barry implements all that stuff, because that's another question mark. But for right now, getting a guy like Carl Brooks, who easily could be a diamond in the rough, I'm kind of a little bit more intrigued by him than Colby Wooden. I just have to say.
Yeah, definitely understand the hype on that end if that's the route you're choosing to go. I don't blame you then. His stats jump off the page to me. So, um, next up, Anders Carlson, the kicker from once again Auburn. Um, Not the most inspiring pick. I think this might have been like the one misfire that the Packers had in the draft. He had a some accuracy issues at Auburn that Goody attributed to just general injuries, but didn't have still had accuracy issues before injuries. 71% field goal percentage throughout his career. Had 60%, 15 of 25 as a freshman, 18 of 25 as a sophomore, 20 of 22 as a junior, and then 14 of 21 as a senior, and then 12 of 17 as a fifth year senior. This kind of looks to be the Mason Crosby replacement if they can't get a deal done with him for this year and future years. Um, but definitely like a sort of a question mark. I'm not like saying that's a misfire to draft a kicker because it's whatever, but I wish they would have had like drafted a kicker that was more for sure than Anders Carlson was. And that's not to say that there's anybody I'm really sad about missing out on in the sixth round, the last pick of the sixth round. But at the same time, it's just like you can find free agency kickers, right? Like some of the best kickers ever were undrafted free agents. Like Adam Vinatieri was an undrafted free agent. Like a lot of them just don't get drafted because they're so fickle and in their ability, right? Kickers are kickers. So
Yeah, it's what is the phrase? Oh, it's basically all or nothing. You're judged by your success and you're
oh
judged
yeah,
by your failures.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Zero sum game.
Yeah, there's a lot of variance in kickers. So, um, but at this point, I think this is sort of where the Rich Bisaccia influence comes in. If you want a kicker, he knew Daniel Carlson from his time with the Raiders. So if he believes in him, then I'm gonna believe Rich. So we'll see how it goes.
Third ranked kicker on Dame Brugler's beast. I will say, as much as his numbers are overwhelming, he was 20 for 22 as a junior in 2020. Yeah. So 90% of his kicks. Did you know? Let's do a little trivia.
Oh God.
What do you think Mason Crosby's career field goal percentage was during his 4 years at Colorado?
This is purely a guess in context of why you asked me this question. 75%.
74.7%. Anders Carlson was 71.8%.
Right. Yeah.
Also, both were selected in the sixth round. Just throwing it out there.
I think it's a process game, right? Like some of the best kickers in college don't make for good NFL kickers. It's just how it is. Like I couldn't tell you the last time we saw a kicker. It's happened a couple of times just since I've been like paying attention as an adult. Of kickers being like, oh, this kicker could be pretty useful at the next level. Maybe you spend like a third round pick on him, and then it just doesn't turn out. Like they're so fickle as players. Like I
Yep.
always think of the Blue Mountain State kicker when I think of kickers in general. Like they just have their processes and they have their yips, and if they can't get over it, it's unfortunate. And that's their career. Like Daniel Carlson was bad in Minnesota, and he goes to a new kicker or a new team and finds it and has been quite the good kicker for the Raiders. So yeah, it's there's so much noise in kickers that I'm not really concerned of them drafting one because they knew that they might need one this year. So
Yep. Door is still open for Mason Crosby, but we'll see. I'm not holding my breath that Mason Crosby comes back for another season, and ultimately it's his decision whether he wants to or not. It's not the Packers.
right. Next pick, Packers picked Carrington Valentine, cornerback from Kentucky. In the seventh round, at pick 232. These are the last 20 picks of the seventh round. Some of your notes: 28th ranked cornerback in Brugger's Beast. Was a three-star coming out of college. Had 119 tackles, one interception, and two sacks in his career at Kentucky. A little bit shorter, but a big athlete, 5'11", 193 pounds, ran a 4.44 and a 9.29 on the athletic score. So basically a Packers pick for a late round shot. So
Yeah,
big. He'll probably be a special teamer. He'll probably be a gunner, frankly.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised with that either. Um, Also, something that stood out in Burglar's notes about from his beast, he noted his volatile tape in 2022. He allowed 8 completions of 25 plus yards. That's not great,
No, it's
but
not great at all.
no, expectations are very low for a guy that is essentially going to be a special teamer right away. And if he puts it all together and becomes rotational defensive back or higher, that'd be great. But at this point, we are purely in dart throw territory.
Yeah, exactly. I had nothing else on him. You want to keep moving?
Yeah, well, let's keep going.
um, Lou Nichols the third, running back out of was Central or Western. I think it's Central.
Central.
Yeah, Central Michigan. Um, I am a big fan of this pick, despite it being the seventh round. I don't know how he fell all the way to the seventh. Um, as a 2-year starter in at Central Michigan, his junior year, or technically his redshirt sophomore year, 341 carries for 1,848 yards and 16 touchdowns, 40 catches, and 338 yards for 2 touchdowns. Mac Offensive Player of the Year. I'd say so. Like, this guy is a fantastic dart throw. In 2022, 9 games, 176 carries, 616 yards, 6 touchdowns. Missed 3 games with a toe injury. But that's a lot of yards, Jordan. That's
A
a
lot
lot
of
of yards. That's
yards.
a lot of potential if you could put him behind the right line. Like, I don't think he'll be playing anytime soon, but kind of fills out as a AJ Dillon replacement. 5'10", 220.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
Not saying that AJ Dillon needs to be replaced, but
No.
like,
But it's
if it should
covering
happen.
bases.
Yeah,
Yep.
covering
Yeah.
bases is right.
Um. Yeah, because we're already. This will be year 4 of AJ Dillon, right? Because he was in the love
Yes.
draft. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. Certainly the production there as a junior was very impressive. Not so much as a senior, but I kind of in the Wicks mold of like, well, it's on the tape. You're gonna, 2,100 plus all-purpose yards is not going to just go away. So yeah, just a matter of how many opportunities he gets behind Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, but making the most of those opportunities is basically what you can do for a 7th guy that is fighting for a spot on the 53 man roster.
Right. I think it's more likely he'll either be the third running back.
Like Patrick Taylor.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find quickly who their running backs are currently on the roster.
Patrick Taylor, Tyler Goodson.
Yep, and then the two starters, AJ
Yep.
Dillon and Aaron Jones. So, yeah, depending on how they see Patrick Taylor or Tyler Goodson this offseason, basically the same situation that Lou Nichols will find himself in as they did last year, trying to figure out a way on the team. So, we'll see. I could see him being either third string running back or practice squad running back, which I'd be a fan of either way. So, moving right along, if that's good by you.
Yep.
Lost my tab.
Anthony Johnson Jr.
Anthony Johnson Jr., the safety out of Iowa State. 5'11", 205. Had 2 interceptions his senior year to go with 60 tackles and 1 forced fumble, 6 pass deflections. Had consistent production over his 4 years, it looks like. 60 tackles, 40 tackles, 55, 60. 7 tackles for a loss, 2, 3, 1. And then, but had 10 pass deflections his, I think, what would be his sophomore year? Yeah, in 2019. Made honorable mention All Big 12 each year and was second team All Big 12 his senior year. It was moved to safety in 2022. So cornerback throughout college until he was moved to safety prior to this past year. So do with that information what you may on the safety issue.
Yeah. Again, lifting from Dane Brugler's Beast. He noted his character, experience, functional size, speed as traits for why Johnson will at least be an NFL player for some time. From anecdotes of what he was like in college. Apparently, like one of the best human beings, very down to earth guy.
Yeah.
All this stuff that again, another part of the reason why you want to see these guys succeed is that a lot of these guys are good people, and that's certainly good to have on your team. Yeah, you mentioned it too. Safety is kind of a new position for him, and succeeded as well as you can. 17th ranked safety in Burglar's class, or I guess Burglar's estimation, and a 5th to 6th round draft grade. In his mind too. So kind of, yeah, a little bit of a steal there. So yeah, kind of intrigued, but I also know that the Packers do need more help in the safety department. So we'll see where they go with that.
Right. Then the last pick, wide receiver Grant Dubose out of Charlotte. Played 2 years. He didn't play in the COVID season, but in his, well, I think it's his junior and senior year, 62 catches and 64 catches for 900 and 800 yards, and had 6 catches or touchdowns and 9 touchdowns over those last 2 years. Pretty fast, 4.57. I should say pretty fast, but average quickness. But Brugler talks about just again lifting from the beast. Plays a lot of body fluidity and has a lot of catch point talent that increases his chances of finding a permanent home in the NFL. But has work to do as not just a jump ball pass catcher. So, if anything, just another dart throw, similar to Samari Torre.
Yeah. I was mentioned earlier about like good feel good stories.
Mm-hmm.
Grant Dubose.
Yep, DeBose.
What? Has probably one of the more, it's very Marjan Beauchamp level of COVID. He was at a Division II school, Miles College. They wiped out their football program, at least for the 2020 season. Decommits there, goes back home to Montgomery, Alabama, works like 3 part-time jobs, including at Walmart, basically tried out at Charlotte and made the team. And now you're a 7th-round draft pick. That's in a span of 2 years, essentially.
Right.
Or 2.5. Impressive stuff. And again, another dart throw, but another wide receiver. We'll see what they can do. Samari Toure was a 7th-round pick last year too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, there'll be a little bit of competition on that regard, but I don't know. That's the fun part of the draft, is seeing where these guys come from and then how they can make their mark. And, they've already battled through plenty of adversity just to get to this point. It's a whole new ball game, obviously, just making the NBA, NFL and succeeding. But, it's a lot of work, a lot of effort just to get to this point. It's good to see these guys have their moments when that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. That wraps up the draft for the Packers. I'd give them a solid B plus, A minus, honestly. I really liked the draft. I really liked how they went about it.
I would say so too. I think that's a lot of where people are, a lot of grades I've seen. Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, PFF, I believe, had it for B plus as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's a nice blend of, they got the help that they need for Jordan Love. It was clear that wide receiver and tight end were one of the biggest, position groups that they needed to address. Obviously, there are a lot of position groups that they needed to address, but still, the fact that they did it really, stood out. A lot of the defensive guys that they got too could easily make their mark on the team. A lot of versatility. I'm excited to see how it all comes together, because I think we have talked about plenty about like, how will the Packers look under LaFleur? He's had to thread this needle in a very specific way, and now it's a blank slate, clean slate. You're essentially, outside of Aaron Jones and what you have on the offensive line. Actually, before I finish that point, were you surprised there were no offensive linemen taken?
No, I think that the quote unquote need for offensive linemen was like a projected, like feigned need. I think they have a deep offensive line group right now, and the only reason I would have taken a tackle is if I'm Goody, is if I assume I'm trading Divock Bakhtiari middle of the season, and even then, they're not really competing this year for anything significant. So if they end up trading David Bakhtiari in the middle of the season for picks or for whatever it may be, then I can go in next year and grab a tackle as well. So um, I'm just gonna say they have 2 first round picks next year because Rodgers is hopefully playing more than 65% of the snaps in New York, barring some sort of catastrophic injury. So they'll have 2 shots at a pretty great player next year if they do need to go tackle or some other lineman next year.
Yeah. Um, Goody mentioned too after the draft that they already felt like it was competitive enough.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and that's certainly, yeah, we both agree on that part. I think from my end, you'd still want to see some stability, but that could easily be addressed if someone takes a leap, or
Mm-hmm.
it could easily be as just Zach Tom getting more snaps. Like the solutions are within that with the players that they have. Um, and they have some guys that like I totally forgot that they drafted Rasheed Walker, who was kind of looked at as a solid offensive lineman, if not a starter level last year. But like Caleb Jones, I'm forgetting another like kind of undrafted guys that they picked up throughout the season or before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was maybe the biggest position group that wasn't addressed, but I certainly think the thinking is very valid of why they did not
Yeah, it's
do that.
a nitpicky sort of
Yeah.
criticism of the draft. I don't think that they needed a tackle or an offensive lineman at all. So awesome. That does it for us, folks. Time for some promos. As always, we hope you're listening to this podcast on Repod. We do a whole bunch of discussion over there, just talking about the community as well as um, just building up our listener minutes over there. So, Repod has a native player that you can listen to there and build the community with us with Talk of the Tundra as well as all the other GSPN shows. So, go check it out. Joinrepod.com/talk of the tundra if you want to go over there. Um, and Adam McGee and Andrew Snyder released a Make Time for This episode this week on Rye Lane, a rom-com that you need to go watch right now, according to their title, as well as looking through John Mulaney's stand-up special. I'm trying to think who else. Check out Cruising for a Bruising with also Andrew and Adam. They'll be doing a recap of the Angels Brewers series probably today, released on Monday when you're probably also listening to this. Um, so go check that out as they go for the series sweep. This is being recorded at 12:50 p.m. Central Standard Time, so the game is yet to throw first pitch, but hopefully they can get the sweep. I think it's I forget who's pitching today. Not that it matters, but
Colin Ray.
Colin Ray, that's right. Um, so we'll see how that goes, and then obviously the Bucks feed. Go check it out with the set ending of the Bucks season. I know you and Adam will have a bunch of off-season content, and I'm sure Ty and Rohan will have as much off-season content as you care to consume, given the premature departure of the Bucks from the playoffs. So that does it for us, folks. Hope you enjoyed our coverage of the draft. We'll be back either next week or whenever to talk about some of the other news happening in Packers world. So, all right, Jordan. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.